news in the war in Ukraine. An explosion at a dam is flooding areas of southern Ukraine.
The apparent purposeful destruction of a major dam.
The water levels could rise by as much as 12 meters.
The Russian occupiers have committed the biggest crime of ecocide.
Whoever committed this act at the dam committed a war crime.
The sheer magnitude of the catastrophe will only become fully realized in the coming days.
In June, the Russian-occupied Kakhovka Dam exploded, unleashing the waters of one of Europe's largest reservoirs over hundreds of villages, towns and cities. The explosion, which Kyiv blames on Moscow, has sparked the worst ecological disaster on the continent in recent history. It will have global repercussions. Now the floodwaters have lowered, civilians are returning to their homes for the first time. The scale of the damage and what needs to be done is only just being revealed.
Ступеньки смыло. Вот. Ну, вот. Вон еще до сих пор с потолка вода капает. Вон висит пузо. У меня нет слов. Просто нет слов. Все, жесть, ужас, жесть, кошмар.
Families in this part of Kherson city now entirely rely on humanitarian aid to survive. At one drop-off point, we met several residents who took us around their destroyed homes. Some of the water has receded, which has allowed partial access, but right now they're desperately trying to find ways to pump the rest of the water out so they can potentially come back to live here. This is Katerina in her house. She's going to show us. Katerina repeatedly warns us to be careful, as parts of her kitchen floor have already caved in.
Що ви відчуваєте зараз?
Жах просто. Жах, ну нічого, все видержимо, дивіться. Дивіться.
Pretty much all that's left are water-soaked walls, which are structurally unsound, and the remains of belongings that are completely destroyed. Everyone here has lived under months of occupation. They have to contend with daily shelling. All they had left were their homes and their belongings, and even that's been taken away from them. Along the same street, we meet 84-year-old Antonina, who's trying to clear the mud and water from her home with her bare hands. She's clearly in shock and wearing the same nightie she was dressed in that morning she was evacuated. It's the only belonging she has left.
Плачу все время, конечно. Я не почуваю, як все тіло просто.
It's not just Kherson that's been impacted. The devastation from the flood and Russia's ongoing shelling continues for hundreds of kilometers. Just north of Mykolaiv, Olha, who lives alone, says she was given no warning.
Не було, ну зате вони зараз ось що наробили. Що хіба це люди?
Olha only escaped death by swimming to safety with her kittens.
Мама вивернулася, я пішов в тобі.
Water levels here are still so high, volunteers deliver vital supplies by boat. One of the biggest demands is clean water. Most of the supply has been cut off or contaminated by sewage. The potential spread of deadly disease is adding to a long list of woes, and so Ukraine's Ministry of Health is closely monitoring the water. When the dam first exploded, the teams here in Zaporizhzhia were testing the water 4 times a day. They've now reduced that to once a day, but they're taking 20 samples, and here they can test everything from cholera to radiation. So far, the results are manageable, but the regional head said it will take at least a decade and for the war to end to repair the destroyed dam and water supply.
Які вірогідно буде державна програма реновації. Маємо надію, що протягом 10 років ми зможемо повернути ситуацію у вихідне становище.
Another problem is drought upstream of the dam.
Access to water, I think, is our major issue right now. The Kakhovka reservoir was the source of drinking water for more than 700,000 people in southern Ukraine, and this access to water for these 700,000 people is in danger.
One of the worst hit areas is Nikopol, a city which once backed onto and relied entirely on the Kakhovka reservoir. Since the reservoir has dried up, there's no water at all for the 50,000 residents who still live here. The fire department told us they've got 10 crews working around the clock to bring water to the citizens of Nikopol. They've just filled up here at this kindergarten in the centre of the city. So people are queuing up, sometimes for hours, to get enough water to last them for a few days. It's a huge risk to do this, though. Families tell us the Russians hit civilians gathering in these water lines.
Обстріли кожен день, практично рідко коли немає. Кожен день їх стріляють, кожен день щось рушать.
The water shortages are only compounding a pre-existing humanitarian crisis here in Nikopol. Just across this dry Kakhovka reservoir bed are Russian positions. They occupy the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Every day the city is being shelled from forces that are occupying that area. Ukraine says since Russia has proved it's already willing to use scorched earth tactics, including blowing up the Kakhovka dam, they would have no qualms in damaging the Russian-held nuclear power plant, which is the largest in Europe.
Зараз наша розвідка отримала інформацію про те, що Росія розглядає.
President Zelensky has repeatedly said that Ukraine has fresh intelligence. There is an immediate plan to do so. Russia has vehemently denied both accusations. In the interim, Ukrainian emergency services are preparing. They are also testing the air for radiation every day. There are other, more immediate consequences of the attack on the dam for the world. Food. This was fully submerged underwater, and now it's just dried up shells for as far as the eye can see. Before the invasion, Ukraine was nicknamed the breadbasket of the world. It was already struggling to export grains and oils because of the conflict. Now local farmers say their fields are turning to salty dust because of the loss of the reservoir.
Я даже не могу представить хотя бы собрать те, чтобы на ноль выйти, я думаю, хотя бы гектаров, тонн 30-40 хотя бы вытянуть в этом году. Огромные потери денег, огромные нервы, как можно сказать, огромные все. Такие вот дела.
Normally, the World Food Programme would buy food from Ukraine and export and send it to countries in Africa, in the Middle East that need food support. Last year, they still managed to buy food here from Ukraine and send to other countries, but we also had to provide food assistance here. Almost 8 million people here last year. We need to provide them with food.
So basically a pre-existing global food problem could be made worse by this flooding, whilst we also have food security issues within Ukraine as well.
There is no doubt that if there is the impact that we think that is going to be here on the agriculture, it would add to a problem that is already complicated around the world and here in Ukraine.
Да.
Так тримати.
Та ну, це щоб на українців переламатися сильно зуби надо стальні.
With no immediate answers, Ukrainians like Olha have to fend for themselves.
Погнила. Гнила уся. Бачите. Нема нічого.
but the future is bleak.